If you want me, come, here I am. Sijaenda pahali. Msiende kusema huyu ametoroka, ameenda. Niko na watu yenu, wanajua every second, wanajua niko wapi. Yeah, wachana na watoto, wachana na wazee. Mimi niko hapa kama mko na swali na mimi. Sawa? Yeah? Sasa hiyo watu sijui wameenda wapi. Waende, wakirudi, watarudi. Kama hawatarudi, wakae. Lakini kwangu, hii ni nyumba yangu. Yeah? Sio yangu, ni ya watoto yangu. Yeah? Na mimi nitalinda kama kila mwananchi mwingine atalinda mali.
That is the fourth president, Uhuru Kenyatta, actually sounding somewhat helpless but very angry at what the current regime is doing, in his words, targeting his family, targeting his mother, targeting his sons. And in the name of looking or raiding the homes to look for arms, and today, in just like the past hour, the president did say, and speaking to the nation, that his sons don't have the supposed 24 arms or whatever it was said, but they only have 3 guns each, given the development where security, official security, was withdrawn from their families. And that is going on. But I want to get the opinion and the reactions first from my panelists here, my guests. Let me call it guests. Panelists make it sound academic. Jane, when you saw this is the fourth president speaking like this, very angry, come for me. What did you feel, first of all, as Jane, and also as someone who wears the hat from Article 19?
Thank you, Mark, for having us. I think for me, first of all, it struck me because in that sense, he was speaking as a father. And in that moment, it was very humbling to see him, I bet, on the receiving end of what would be an injustice. And I think for me, it's the chilling effect. I think we've been saying this over and over again, that power is transient. And people need to be aware that the fundamental, we need to preserve the fundamental principles of democracy, justice, rule of law, if we are to avoid being in those situations. So the standard is not that I'm the one who's calling the shots in this moment. The standard is rule of law, justice. This is what procedure is. Let's respect it. This is what human rights are. Regardless of who it concerns, we must respect those principles. Otherwise, we're just caught up in this cycle where whenever A is in power, this is how they treat their opponents or their enemies. And then tomorrow, somebody else is in power. And then we just continue with that cycle because we've lost the fundamental basis, I guess, of our democracy.
And I don't know if it was you or Demas who said this regime policing. That's what it is right now.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing. Demas, as you were watching that, I've heard people react like, you know, taste of your own medicine. I have no, you know, sympathy for what he's going through, because under his regime, many people were also at the receiving end of misuse of the police service. What did you think?
Well, for me, I always view the law as an umbrella that is supposed to protect everyone, right? And we've come to a situation where we instrumentalize the law to use it against our enemies. Forgetting that there'll come a time when that law, you'll need that law to protect you. And so I always fight for constitutionalism and the rule of law. And that is why we have what is supposed to be an independent police, independent DPP. And so that the decision to investigate, to charge, is not really weaponized. It is only done when someone is actually really a criminal.
Yeah.
And so when you see political opponents being investigated, discovered with drugs and things like that, it is very worrying, because it means that perhaps we are not really as independent as we hope to be.
And you've just mentioned something there, political opponents, and one of them in this past few days has been Pauline Njoroge, well known, has been was one of the communications personnel, online especially, for the former regime, and now she's has been in court and in custody, arrested for supposedly being in possession of narcotics, allegedly. But we're seeing some papers here, and this is from the Office of the Public Prosecution, and this is in the name of false publication contrary to Section 22(1)(b)(d) of the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act number 5 of 2018, as well as, this is the same one as Section 23 of the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act number 5 of 2018. And she is said to have tweeted on the 21st day of this month on her verified account and saying, "So police officers will now be using South Sudanese number plates when going to raid homes of innocent Kenyans." And then another one, "Nikiwekelea Biblia chini nachukua bunduki na nikuwe dictator." Basically questions around what's happening right now using her social media platform. So there's one way of clamping down on any form of dissent, and we've seen it on the former president's remarks, but there's also another one in terms of when people are expressing themselves online. Speak to that, because it's something that you've fought, especially when they bring up the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act.
Well, this is a matter very close to my heart because I've been fortunate enough to fight for freedom of expression in Kenya. I litigated the case that got criminal defamation removed out of our statute books. I got misuse of licensed telecommunication device removed, which was actually being used against journalists, dissenters. I got the other one, undermining authority of a public officer. These are all laws that used to be used against freedom of expression, and now when the Cybercrimes Act was passed, certain laws were snuck back in. So sections 23 and 22 of the Cybercrimes Act basically returns criminal defamation and also speaks to publishing false information. And so who is this that is supposed to be the arbiter of truth? For sure it cannot be government. Yet it's the government purporting to be the arbiter of truth. In the last round of Maandamano, we saw DCI using pictures of suspects that were actually from 5 years ago. That was publishing false information, but who will investigate them? And so we need to go back to what our Constitution says. It says everyone has the right to freedom of expression, regardless of any medium. But it also says that your freedom of expression does not extend to propaganda for war, incitement to violence, advocacy for hatred, and so on and so forth. Did what Pauline say amount to those things? I think not. And so we are really sliding to a point where people will be scared to talk. And this is a constitutional democracy where freedom of expression is paramount, access to information is paramount. Without that, there's no democracy. They usually say freedom of expression is the oxygen of democracy. So we need to get out of this darkness.
Any concerns from where you sit when you see this being used against people who speak against power and their use of social media platforms?
Certainly, because I think for the longest time, the only option we had of dissent was Maandamano, so to say offline. But in the era that we are in, some people might not be they might not participate in street protests as we know them, but they're using that space, the online space, to sort of express their opinions. And it has been quite effective. We've had, usually for Kenyans, we know Kenyans on Twitter, we've had a couple of hashtags over the years that have forced government or various institutions to take action. And therefore, once we start cracking down on that, what are we doing? As Demas says, the computer misuse cybercrimes, I know, is something we've tried to fight in court. We initially had a suspension on it for a period of time when the High Court matter was going on. But then at the end of it, the court did find that, in fact, the act is proper. Of course, we were not happy, and therefore it's subject to appeal at the moment. But it's just one of those other ways that we are seeing crackdown, basically on voices that are quite essential in terms of driving messages across various platforms. There are certain populations that thought they wouldn't watch mainstream media, but they'll get the information through Kenyans on Twitter. So you're essentially isolating or denying a certain demographic of Kenyans from the freedom to
But let's speak
engage.
to something that happens on a very practical basis, on a personal basis. And on a WhatsApp group, last week, I got videos of people, you know, with being given pangas. And to be honest, it's chilling.
Yes.
And guys were like, hey, blood will pour. It's bad. Is that wrong, using your platform? Because we need to speak to that honestly. I don't know if you saw it or received it, but I didn't want to forward that because it's spreading fear.
Yes.
Is that wrong legally speaking?
Legally speaking, if you share it knowing that, if you can't vouch for that video,
Or verify?
yeah, then it might actually cause panic. It might disturb the peace, right? But also, if you believe it is true and you believe that it is information that other people should have, there's nothing that prevents you from doing that.
If you believe.
Yeah, but now, so yeah, it's one belief. You know, everyone has the freedom of belief. You can believe whatever you want.
Yes.
But I know that, and I remember during last election, there were sometimes clips of politicians speaking in their mother tongue, and then someone transcribes it but uses the wrong. Yeah, and that is actually trying to incite violence, trying to isolate one tribe against another.
And that was
example.
used this past week as well.
Yes, and
one of the clips.
And in fact, this is where I expect the National Cohesion and Integration Commission to come in to investigate who does this, because I even know that sometimes we get clips that where someone says this is happening here, and then you find that it's a clip from Central African Republic or things like that, a war-torn area.
Yeah.
And so why do people spread this? But freedom of expression, notwithstanding, is that we should be free to get all the information we want or desire. But now it's upon who are these authors. And for example, if that clip indeed was true, and you come from a volatile area, you actually, it's in your interest to get that information, to know that perhaps because
Measures
I
it
am
should take.
from X and this is a Y area, to take precautions.
Right.
And so, yeah, it depends on who made the video and what was the intention about it. But it's also not good just to send everything. And you know, sometimes you get information, for example, from your parents about a terror warning, and then you remember that you saw the exact thing 5-10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But perhaps they don't know any better,
Yeah.
right? So they're
It comes from a good place that they share. Like
Yeah.
they tell you be safe and be secure.
Yeah.
From your point in that
I think
issue,
in that conversation,
citizen responsibility.
Yeah, we talk about misinformation, disinformation, and just being able to regulate that. But I think the challenge with it is that there's such a thin line between freedom of expression and sort of content, what we call content moderation, and being able to ensure we maintain that appropriate balance. And I think for me, in a sense, yeah, there is responsibility upon you not to knowingly misinform or disinform people. But then there are other conversations going around how we are going to do content moderation, what we can do to verify this information, what responsibilities lie with the platform owners, how can we assist them do a better job. In terms of, we've had conversations about fact checkers and just their policies around just being able to verify and taking down information that is actually legitimate. Because the other problem then is if you leave it too wide, then even like genuine, legitimate freedom of expression may be flagged down because of either specific words, like that generalization that NCIC tried to do last time during the election. Remember the list of, it was called hate terms, 20 terms, but those terms are terms that we use in normal conversation, so you can't just put a blanket ban on them. You've got to have a well-balanced, fair, accurate process of being able to remove flag, but with actual intelligence on whether it's right or wrong.